Last time on the Skip and Josh podcast.
He suffered a lacerated middle finger during his last start, and he's willing to try any kind of unorthodox treatment to get back on the field.
Okay.
So friends and fans have reportedly suggested using urine to treat the finger.
Well, didn't Moises Alou once do that?
I'm not sure, but this was his quote. He said, "If it helps, I'll put a sign-up sheet and everyone can come and pee."
You're listening to the Skip and Josh podcast with Skip Sherman and Josh Obadia.
Hello?
Skippy,
Hey.
how's it going?
Great. Sunday night?
But not just any Sunday night, it's Victoria Day weekend, so that means I don't have to go to work tomorrow.
Actually, I am working tomorrow.
Well, that's because you work for an American company.
Yeah. So I told my boss that I would work on my holiday and take off Memorial Day like the rest of my coworkers.
You're such a trooper.
It's actually, if I would take off tomorrow, I'm just punishing myself because
You're going to get 1,000 emails.
it's just like, yeah, just gonna get a million emails, and then when I come to work on Tuesday, I'm gonna be overwhelmed, and then next week when it's Memorial Day and I'm working, everybody else is off, and it's completely useless. So it's totally counterproductive.
You did the right thing.
So yeah, I guess, but it's kind of weird because like everybody in my house is off. My wife and my kids have no school, so we'll see. But anyways, happy Victoria Day to you.
You as well.
Or as they call it in this province, I'm not sure what it's called. Seems to change all the time here.
Yeah. So, should we talk about sports?
Well, would you like to talk about sports?
I think I'd like to talk about sports.
Well, we didn't actually text very much this week, and we didn't actually set a time when we would call each other. So, I had just texted you about an hour ago, said, "Hey, how about those Vegas Golden Knights? You want to get on do an episode?"
You were MIA this weekend. I texted you a few times. I got no responses.
I was busy. We had visitors. One of our most loyal listeners, Mark from Philadelphia, was in town, so we spent a bit of time together.
Very nice.
Yeah.
The National Hockey League.
So let's talk about the Vegas Golden Knights, because you know how happy I am that they've advanced to the Stanley Cup final.
I know, you're thrilled. Now you get to stick it to everybody. More people.
Exactly, and I really do want them to win the cup. You know, by the way, they didn't just make it to the Stanley Cup final. They've lost a total of 3 games the entire playoffs.
I know, and they beat Winnipeg 4-1.
Yeah,
it's not like the series was not close at all.
And by the way, you know why they lost game 1? Because they were coming off a long layoff, and Winnipeg had just played a very high tempo series, 7-game series with Nashville. So
Yeah.
you knew Winnipeg was going to win game 1 of that series.
Yeah, but like, we've talked about the Vegas Golden Knights like most of the season.
Mhm.
Just like kind of everybody else has, basically. It started off with they're going to be bad, and then it continued, the season started, and I'm like, oh my god, they're hot, but it won't last. And then a few months in, it won't last, and then another month in, it won't last, and then at a certain point, everybody realizes, I guess they're for real, even though you can't name more than 2 players on their team, right? Or why they're winning. Like, I didn't know why they're winning. I just said, hey, they're winning, And then the playoffs started, and then, I did think they would win, at least the first couple rounds, like I predicted them, but I really didn't think they'd get this far. I didn't think they'd get past Winnipeg, and like, I still don't fully understand how they're doing it. I have watched the last few games, really to kind of see what they're doing. What are they doing? Why are they so good? And I still don't know the answer. I mean, other than Marc-Andre Fleury, right?
I don't know the answer either, but I'll say this. Anytime you hear a general manager or a head coach in any professional team sport talking, they make it seem like their job is the hardest job on the planet. But really, as evidenced by the Vegas Golden Knights, it's really not that difficult, because they had no players on their team a year ago. A year ago today, there was nobody on the roster.
But the thing is,
they've taken these ragtag players.
Yeah.
They're not really ragtag players, but players that the other teams didn't want or didn't protect.
Yeah.
They formed a team. They obviously devised a system that they're playing.
Well, they hired a
And-
really good coach, right?
Yeah, and they're winning games. So I honestly don't think it's that complicated.
But the weird thing is, the GM, when they put together this team, the intention wasn't even to win. He didn't even their own general manager wasn't even trying to assemble a team that was going to win. You know what I mean? They drafted guys. There are guys on their roster that they drafted fully with the intention of trading them at the trade deadline. James Neal is first on that list, you know, and then whoever else they could have gotten anything for. And then they had to like make a kind of U-turn at the trade deadline and say, whoa, we're not doing that. Right?
You know, by the way, this isn't the first expansion team to make it to the Stanley Cup final in their first year. Did you know that?
Well, I know. It's because it's the St. Louis Blues, right?
Right. But the reason they made it is because they had a whole conference just of expansion teams.
Yeah.
So one of them was definitely going to make it.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
No. It's kind of like the Little League World Series where you know there's going to be an American team in the final.
It's exactly
because
that. Yeah.
One side of the bracket is all American teams and the other side of the bracket is the rest of the world.
Right.
So
like, I've been trying to I was thinking about this yesterday, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to properly put it into words, but like, I want to know, like, if you kind of have the same feeling about the Vegas Knights as I do. You know, like, when you watch them play, what you do see is a team that's very disciplined, and I'm not talking about taking penalties or not taking penalties. I'm just talking about the way they stick to their system and the way they all play their role, right?
mm-hmm.
And a team that is so like patient and like resilient, the score doesn't seem to faze them, the situation doesn't seem to faze them. Someone comes up with a goal out of nowhere, and they haven't scored a lot of goals. Like, the scores are low in their games, right? When you see like their scoring, you know, Marchessault is leading their team in scoring in the playoffs with 8 goals, which is not very much when you consider a lot of the other teams have 10 plus, 13, you know, Scheifele, and you know, like, but you know, we've played like low level team sports, right? Like our ball hockey league and softball, right? You know,
Very low level.
and I remember being in kind of situations that I think that teams facing the Vegas Knights feel. I think a lot of the success of the Vegas Knights, and now bear with me again, I don't know if I'm explaining this properly. I think that some of the success of the Vegas Golden Knights is that the opponents are, it's the opposite of taking them lightly. They fully know that they're good, but they have in the back of their mind, like, how could we be losing to this team? You know, like, how could we be losing to this team? And, you know, everybody, I know it's a cliche, everybody's gripping their stick too tight. Everybody's trying a little bit too hard. I'm talking about the opposing teams, right? Mm-hmm. I really saw that in Winnipeg in the fact that they're like, I think they're looking at each other in the dressing room saying, how are we losing to this expansion team? And I think that's the kind of feeling opponents have had towards the Vegas Golden Knights for most of the year. You know, it started off with like, oh yeah, these guys are no good. And then the second time around, you're like, oh, we can't take them lightly. But still, when you get behind by a goal to them, you must be looking around the bench and everyone's like, man, we can't lose. I think the opponents feel all the pressure.
That's probably true. But in addition to that, it's very reminiscent of the Mama's Boys softball team, if you recall.
Well, 100%. I was thinking about that.
Because they're playing with house money. They've been playing with house money, pardon the pun, because they play in Vegas.
Yeah.
Since day one, since October. Because there was no expectations for this team whatsoever. So if they won 5 games all year or 10 games all year, no one would have even complained. Everyone was in love with them. All the home team fans were buying their jerseys and coming to games, and it's a party every time you go to a Knights game. So they could do no wrong. It didn't even matter.
I want to fill in the listeners to what you're referring to because I thought of this exact example. This is the exact example that I thought of. The Mama's Boys was a team that me and Josh played on, a softball team here in Montreal. We're not talking high level. This is, you know, beer league softball, whatever. But
lower than beer league.
We took it pretty seriously. We're in our 20s, and And one year we ended up on this team, which was basically a ragtag group of players that had been around the league for a while, and we just joined up and decided to form a team all together. It was the leftovers of a whole bunch of teams and players that were kind of free agents, you know?
Yeah.
And the rest of the league didn't take us seriously. And we got off to some ridiculous start, right? Like 10-1 or something. I remember we were crazy
Was it
hot.
that good? I don't remember.
Then we kind of cooled off, but like when we went into the playoffs, our opponents, specifically the team that we played in the semifinals, who was like our arch rival, right? They didn't take us seriously. They thought they were going to roll over on us. And when they found themselves in a situation where they were about to lose the series, they kind of blew it in a way. Not we deserved everything we got. We won the series, but they were almost in disbelief that, like, how could we have lost to these guys? Like, right?
The name of that team was Reservoir Dogs, but I like to call them Choking Dogs.
Oh, in case there's any listeners out there. Yeah, so I do feel that there's a kind of like the opponents are not taking them lightning anymore, the Vegas Knights, but they are almost trying too hard, or they don't know what they need to do in order to beat them, like mentally, you know, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense, but I also think that, and it, you know, as I alluded to earlier, I think every player on the Knights team literally goes to the rink every day with a big smile on their face, thinking, look at this, you know, I'm on this new team with all these new guys, and let's just have fun because there's no expectations, and we'll see what happens. And they actually, I think they actually enjoy going to the rink and playing games and going to practice. I think they actually like it. I mean, really, what professional athlete wouldn't like that? I mean, you're getting paid millions of dollars to play a game. But I mean, some athletes who, you know, especially the veterans who've done this year after year, they get tired, they get battered and bruised after years of playing. And then maybe they don't enjoy going to the rink every day if it's their 10th year or whatever it is. But these guys, you know, some of them are veterans, a lot of them are veterans, and it's almost like they had a new lease on life.
Exactly that. And besides the veterans, there's at least half the team here. I'm looking at their roster that probably prior to the expansion draft were worried about, like, am I going to have a career in hockey? You know, like, where is my career going? Am I going to be sent down to the minors? Am I going to be out of the league in a couple of years? Right. Some of these guys were probably really looking at themselves saying, what do I have to do? Or is my career maybe almost over and I didn't really make it? And now these guys are going to win the cup, you know, or
we don't know that yet, but I hope they do.
Or was about to say, or come really close, you know? Well, like, okay, so Tampa, Washington. Like, Tampa's ahead now, 3-2. We don't know what's going to happen in the rest of the series. Washington could still come back, although it does seem unlikely. Like you said, the ultimate tease, right? They went up 2-0, and now they kind of faded a little bit. But why couldn't the Vegas Golden Knights beat Tampa or Washington? Why couldn't they?
They totally can. They've
beaten everybody else.
They had more points than both of them, I think, during the regular season.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of the Washington-Tampa series, I didn't tell you this because I didn't speak to you, but I did tell a friend of mine that whoever wins Game 5 is going to win the series. So according to that, Tampa's going to win the series if it holds true.
So we should have a Tampa-Vegas series, which definitely will be
the warmest series of all time.
I was just about to say that. There's never been it's impossible that there's a warmer series than this, right?
Well, the Florida Panthers were in the final one year, but I don't remember who they played.
And who did the Kings play when they were in the finals twice?
The Rangers. They played the Rangers one of those years.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, unless they're playing the Florida teams, all the rest of the teams in the East are cold weather teams.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that should be interesting. Players going to the rink in their shorts, no matter where they're playing. Both.
Oh no! You know how it is. They have to wear suits, of course, when they go to the rink.
They have to, right? That's true.
By the way, speaking of that Washington Tampa series, I think it was in Game 2 or 3. I don't remember exactly which game it was, where Tom Wilson, noted goon, got hit from behind by, I think, Victor Hedman, if I'm not mistaken, and Hedman was not suspended, but then they were interviewing Tom Wilson after the game, and he said something like, you know, if I did that, I would be suspended for sure. He's right. He probably would have been suspended had he done that because he is a repeat offender and he's done many goonish things in the past. And he is the last person who should be complaining about getting a dirty hit against him. He deserved that hit.
He really should have just shut his mouth and not said anything. Like,
He
the
really
fact that
should
he's
have.
commenting on other people's hits is just something that he shouldn't be doing.
Right. I mean,
No.
the hit was on him, so that's
Yeah.
why they were asking him about it. But still, he should just shut his mouth. You're absolutely right.
So I just want to get back to the Vegas Golden Knights for a second.
Okay.
The one advantage that they do have, if we're talking about can they win and can they keep it going, is no matter who they're playing, whether it's Vasilevsky, who's fantastic by the way,
Mm-hmm.
or Holtby, but Fleury's the best goalie in the playoffs. It's
And not only that, this is of all the years that Fleury's won cups and everything, this is Fleury's best playoff year, which at 30 something is unbelievable.
Do you see his stats? He has 4 shutouts. I'm looking at them. His .947 save percentage and a 1.68 goals against average.
Oh, I think
which
it went up to 1.68 because I think it was lower like 2 games ago.
It's really absurd, you know. And Vasilevsky is fantastic on Tampa. Don't get me wrong. He basically won them Game 5.
By the
right?
way, let's talk about the Lightning for 2 seconds. You
Sure.
remember way back when they won the Cup with Brad Richards and Vincent Lecavalier and Martin St. Louis and Nikolai
sure.
Habibulin, right?
Yeah.
And then they had to sort of break up the team a little bit because of the stupid salary cap. And I think they
Yeah.
let Habibulin go. And then they weren't the same team. I don't think they ever went back to the Stanley Cup final until they got Ben Bishop.
Yeah.
So they got Ben Bishop, and then they went back to the final, and then they lost, I think, with Ben Bishop. So anyway, they didn't win the cup, but the point is they were able to retool their entire team and compete for the cup again.
Yeah.
Anyway, then, of course, they have this Vasilevsky comes out of nowhere, I guess, or maybe not out of nowhere. They decide that Ben Bishop is expendable. They let him go.
Yeah.
And now they've got Stamkos, and now they've got Kucherov, and they've got all these other guys whose name escaped me at the moment.
Yeah, they have tons of offense.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now they've retooled
Braden
their
Point.
team. Yes, Braden Point.
Yeah.
Yanni Gourde.
Yeah.
Mikhail Sergachev.
Well, him they got from the Canadiens.
So they've retooled their team yet again, and now it looks like they're going to go to the Stanley Cup final yet again. So my whole point of this is, in the span of like 15 years or so,
yeah.
if they go to the final again this year, that'll be the 3rd time they go to the finals with a completely different roster each time.
Yeah.
And they were able to rebuild and do it all over again. So why can't a team like the Montreal Canadiens even go to the Stanley Cup final once in that span of time?
Well, I mean, what did happen with Tampa is that in between the first and second time, they really sucked and they got the first overall pick, which they used as Stamkos.
Okay.
Right?
Fine.
So that was the kind of big star that they had the second time, and now he's still there as more of a veteran. And they just draft well. Like a lot of those guys you mentioned, Braden Point, he was a 3rd round pick, right? Like this guy is a star in the league. He's a star in the league, and Andrei Vasilevsky, they had Ben. First of all, they got Ben Bishop almost for nothing when they got him from Ottawa. It was a steal. And Vasilevsky was actually a 1st round pick, and they've kind of brought him along slowly and waited till he was ready. And now he's one of the best goalies in the league. He probably is going to win the Vezina, right?
They didn't draft Ben Bishop. I didn't even know that.
No, I think Ben Bishop came to them from Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
you can look it up, but I
I'm gonna look it
remember.
up.
I think Ottawa basically kind of gave him away for almost nothing.
Okay, well, we'll find out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we can talk forever about hockey. Being two Canadian boys, we can keep going on and on about hockey. But actually, this is one of the years where I've followed the playoffs all the way through to the finals. A lot of times I lose interest, but the series have been really, really good.
Tampa acquired Bishop for forward Corey Conacher and a 4th round draft pick on April 3rd, 2013.
There you go.
In his Lightning debut, Bishop had 45 save shutout.
Bishop was a good goalie.
He
but
was.
He's one of these guys that's so big, right? That a lot of times these super sized goalies, they're a little bit awkward physically,
Mm-hmm.
So he was one of these guys that when he was healthy, he was so good, but he had a hard time staying healthy, So do you want to keep going on hockey or you have other stuff?
The National Basketball Association.
I want to talk about the NBA playoffs for a few seconds.
NBA playoffs. Wasn't even planning to talk about them tonight.
Here's okay, so this is what bugs me.
Things that bug me?
So I commend the NBA because what they do in the first and I think the second round, sorry, not the first round, but the
Oh,
second
I already
round.
know what this is. I already know what's bugging me.
Yeah. Well, in the second round, well, if there are two teams that are playing each other, they just start the round even if the previous round isn't done. So
Yeah.
good for them. I applaud the NBA for that. That's great. But then I don't understand what happened at the beginning of this round. There was like 3 days off in between the end of round 2 and the beginning of round 3 for no apparent reason. They could have started. Anyway, finally they get started. Each series plays 2 games, and then they decide to take Thursday and Friday off, again for no apparent reason.
They've done this before the NBA. I seem to remember talking about this where like they have so much momentum going and the playoffs are heating up and it's exciting, and then all of a sudden you have no games on.
I mean,
Right?
I get that it was a travel day for both series, but the thing is, if you're going to take days off, why a Thursday and Friday? Those are days you want to play.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, it seemed to me that they really wanted games on Saturday and one game on Sunday, but they still could have done that.
I know.
Yeah, I don't get it. You know, you look, you have a far more experience in terms of scheduling than I do. You don't know what the situation is in some of the arenas or whatever, or
Right,
if it's
exactly.
purely a TV thing. Who knows? But it definitely was very suspicious.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. It looks
Oh,
like
nothing about the actual games, just about the schedule.
right. Well, I mean, Houston had to win game 1 of their series if they were going to have a chance to beat Golden State. They lost game 1. They came back and won game 2. But
Yeah.
now, you know,
They lost game 3.
they lost game 3. They lost game 3.
the game
They
just
got,
ended.
Yeah, they got killed.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well, Golden State's a better team. Golden State's a better team when they're playing well. Houston's fine. I don't think Houston is as good as their record. They're not. Look, you don't follow the NBA as much, but like their coach is Mike D'Antoni.
I
right?
know.
And this guy has far from a stellar record when it comes to playoffs, because
He got hosed when he was coaching Phoenix with Steve Nash.
he did. But his teams are built one way, which is all offense.
I like that.
I know, but it's not a recipe for winning in the playoffs. You have to be able to defend, right? And now Houston set the record, right, for most 3-point attempts. They're going to keep that record's going to keep getting broken every year, but like I think half their shots are threes. And you know how that is. When you have a hot night and you shoot well, you're going to win. You get cold, you're going to lose, right?
Right.
So can you stay hot for 4 out of 7 games? I guess not, right? So far not. They lost 2 out of 3, so.
So now the Boston-Cleveland series, you'll recall that I said if Boston wins game 2, the series is over. I did say that.
I know,
And Boston won game 2.
but then they got killed in game 3.
They got killed in game 3, but still, the truth is Boston hasn't lost at home in these playoffs.
No, they haven't.
And there are at least 2 more games in Boston in this round.
No, I expect the series to go to game 7 in Boston and the Celtics winning game 7.
Okay.
That's what I'm kind of expecting. I'm shocked that Cleveland came out and won by so much and Boston played so poorly in game 3. I was just so surprised.
Meanwhile, you did say that after game 1 that LeBron was going to have an insane game 2, and he did, but they still lost.
The best part about game 2 was the commentary. And I'm not a fan of Mark Jackson, to be honest. I do like Jeff Van Gundy. But they're right there, courtside, Mm-hmm. The announcers in the NBA, they're right there, right next to the scorer's table. And Van Gundy had a couple of interesting things to say that he picked up on, which was like every time the Cavs were making a bad play or they turned the ball over, there was a bad pass. He said there's a lot of like sideways glances going on and like real like looking sideways at their teammates. Like he said, the body language among the Cavs when things are going poorly is they're all looking at each other and like blaming each other, like, oh, what are you doing? What kind of bad, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing in terms of how they were looking at each other sideways for every bad play. Like that's quite pathetic, right? When you think about it.
It actually doesn't surprise me, but
no, they're,
who to blame if you don't like the players on the team? You blame the general manager. And in
LeBron
this case,
James in this case.
Exactly. He's the one who assembled this team. And if he isn't willing to forego some of his salary to acquire better players, then this is what he's going to have to deal with.
But it's not necessarily his salary. They're one of the top spending teams in the league. They just haven't spent the money wisely.
Well, I mean, it's not like you can go out and trade for,
Yeah.
for Curry or Durant or players like that because they're not available.
But the reality is they did have Kyrie, who's one of the top 10 players in the league. And
And they ended up
basically
getting
gave him away
absolutely
for
nothing for him.
Well, they got this draft pick that they're going to have, which I think is going to be the 8th pick.
Exactly.
But the 8th pick in this year's draft is going to be like Trae Young, maybe.
There's a good chance that the 8th pick will be a Duke Blue Devil because there's
Yeah.
5 of them in the draft.
Maybe it's going to be Gary Trent, or maybe it's going to be Wendell Carter. But like whoever they're going to get with the 8th pick is not a franchise player. It's not a Kyrie,
It's not.
So, yeah. All right, that's the NBA.
I want to go back to hockey for a second. I was thinking about this. So the Nashville Predators, they had an amazing regular season, and it seemed like they were the team to beat. And I think they expected to go back to the Stanley Cup final after going there a year ago and coming somewhat close to winning the cup.
To me, they played like a team that was on a mission.
Yeah,
all year.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you look up and down their roster, they have very few, if any, weaknesses at all, anywhere. It's like, I don't think there's a bad player on that team. But now, the way their season ended, it's possible that they may want to unload Pekka Rinne.
It's possible.
Now, I still think Pekka Rinne is an all-star goaltender. I mean, he's one of the Vezina nominees, which means he's one of the top 3 goalies in the league.
I don't think they'll get a lot for him if they wanted to trade him. I don't think it's worth trading.
Well, they probably won't get a lot for him, but on the other hand, if you want to get a good goalie, I mean, any team that has a good goalie isn't going to want to give up their good goalie, right?
Yeah, and I don't think the guy they have backing up Rinne, I don't think they see him as a starter.
Well, I have a solution that can help the Nashville Predators and help another team as well.
So you put some stuff into the trade machine, and
Well,
you push go, and
really just
what
into
happened?
my brain.
Okay. So what's
And it's gonna sound crazy, but hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
Pekka Rinne for Carey Price. These two teams have made a blockbuster trade before.
I love it.
I still think Pekka Rinne is an amazing goaltender. The Nashville Predators probably think Carey Price is a better goaltender. This would be a win-win because the Predators are going to get their goalie that they think is going to take them to the Stanley Cup. The Canadians are going to unload this huge 10-year contract that they can't get rid of. And it's going to officially signal the rebuild for the franchise.
But this will come down to the contract situation. What, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, Nashville knows exactly what they're getting. They're getting a 10-year contract.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Pekka Rinne is only under contract for 1 more year at $7 million. So he's actually quite a bargain.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
If I'm the Habs, look, do I like Carey Price? Yes, I do. I love the guy. But realistically, like, I would do that.
I would do it. The Habs will not do it.
No, of course they won't.
It's
But
because they traded one of their superstars to Nashville a couple of years ago and they got burned. However, coincidentally, they traded PK after giving him a big contract.
Yeah.
So that means that anything's on the table. Although Carey Price does have a no trade clause, correct?
Carey Price has a no movement clause, and also so does Rinne. I'm just looking at it right now.
But they could elect to waive that no movement clause.
It says here on I'm on a good website. I don't know if you ever go on it, called Cap Friendly.
Haven't.
So it says he has a modified no trades, no movement clause. So unless you examine the details of the contract, you don't really know. But yeah, it could be waived, I guess. All right, so let's shout that out to Bergevin and David Poile. Actually, we have a contact. We could probably get a message to David Poile if we really had to.
Yes, we could.
Right?
Maybe I'll do that this weekend.
Yeah. All right, so I'm glad you came back to hockey.
Major League Baseball.
So do you want to hear a funny story about my fantasy baseball team?
Yeah, sure.
So the other day I was just checking my roster to see how my players had done on that particular night. And you know, when when the Post-it note near the player's name is red, it means either something really good happened or something really bad happened, right?
He's either out for the year or he hit for the cycle.
Exactly. So I'm always nervous when I see that red Post-it note.
Yeah.
So sure enough, my catcher's got a red Post-it note next to his name. And I see that he only had 1 at bat in the game and he was 0 for 1. So I'm like, oh, great. What happened? So I open it up and I read it. He got hit by a pitch on the wrist and he had to leave the game.
Okay.
And anyway, he's back now. This was a few days ago, so who knows? Like, but at the time, I didn't know how long is he going to be out. Could be out for the year. You never know when you get hit by a pitch in the wrist, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, to add insult to injury, I keep scrolling down and then I look at my pitchers and I see one of my pitchers has a red Post-it note. And I could see his stat line. His ERA for that game was 54.
Yeah.
Not 5.4, 54. So I open it up, and sure enough, that was the pitcher that hit my catcher.
I want to tell you a story. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but it's in the 90s. And we were doing one of those fantasy playoff hockey pools where you pick players.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to strategically pick players that you think are going to go far, right?
Of course.
Teams that might go to the final, right? The more games they play, the more points they're going to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular pool, I add Mario Lemieux and Adam Graves on the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
And they played in the series in the first round.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Graves slashes Lemieux on the wrist. Lemieux's out. And Graves gets suspended.
It's
My
the
pool's
worst
over.
case scenario.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of the Vegas Golden Knights and their coach, I remember, I think it was my first ever playoff hockey pool when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I loaded up on Red Wings and I picked Gerard Gallant.
He was a good playoff performer, that guy.
He
Yeah,
was.
they were the wings always went far, so you always tried to you ended up taking the third and fourth line guys on the wings because you know they were going to the finals,
Yeah.
right?
And now
Yeah.
he's going to the finals again.
That's true. What else do you have? I have 2 notes, but I want to save both of them for the end.
All right, well, we're at the end.
Oh, okay. I want to ask you a question.
Ask away.
And I think I already know the answer, but I'm curious. Did you watch any of the royal wedding?
0. Did you?
I did.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I could do a show with you anymore.
I didn't wake up at 5:30. I
If you had
recorded
woken
it.
up early to watch that, I would not
No.
talk to you ever again.
I recorded it starting at 5:30. I woke up my normal time. And then when my wife woke up, we watched like whatever we could, fast forwarding a lot of the boring parts, but
What do you mean a lot of the boring parts? The entire thing is boring. It's just a wedding.
the show was recorded for 5 hours and 30 minutes.
It's just a wedding.
I know. So we watched like about
I'd rather
couple
watch
of hours.
your wedding video than watch the royal wedding.
That's true. Well, you're part of it, so
At least I'm
that's why.
in your wedding video.
Yeah. I knew the answer. I figured there's no way you're watching, but I was just curious to know. So
I
you have
can't-
no feelings towards Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
I can't believe how much it was talked about leading up to it. You could not get away from it no matter how hard you tried. It was everywhere.
You don't watch the show Suits, do you?
No, I know she was in it.
Yeah.
It's
I don't watch
they,
it either.
they
but-
shoot it not far from where I work.
Yeah. It's filmed in Toronto. Like
Yeah.
she's been living in Toronto for the last 5 years, Meghan Markle.
I never once bumped into her.
All right, that's awesome.
What was the second note?
Mailbag.
Well, we're gonna head towards the show close, but when we do, I also want to tell you that I have some listener mail.
Okay, let's read it.
I'm gonna read it verbatim. So on the last episode, you mentioned a story about urine.
Yeah, Jameson Tyone.
Jameson Tyone,
Yeah,
and how he was gonna pee on his hand to heal his injury.
right. I don't know if he actually did that, but I know that he pitched, so
Yeah.
either it healed on its own or who knows what.
So I got this message from a very good friend of the show, Derek. It seems like we talk about him in every episode.
Yeah.
He sent me this message saying, "Speaking of urine, when I stepped on a sea urchin in St. Kitts this winter and got 4 needles stuck at the bottom of my foot, we went to the beachside bar for help, and the woman looked at my wife and said, 'Do you need to pee? If you do, you should do it on your husband's foot.'"
This didn't really happen.
I don't think Derek's making this up.
Isn't this from a Seinfeld episode?
Just a natural human function. Happens to be on my sofa instead of in the toilet where it would normally be.
And then he continues by saying, thankfully, she did not have to go, and the needles eventually, slowly and harmlessly, went away. Why, you don't think it's true? I think it's true because I remember him sort of mentioning the story to me once before.
I
when
mean, he
came
hasn't
back from
mentioned
that
it to
trip.
me, so I'll take your word for it.
Right. All right, you got nothing else?
No, I got no listener mail.
All right, this is going to conclude episode 96.
Oh my goodness, we're getting closer and closer.
We're on the home stretch towards 100. So before we sign off, I want to remind you that you can, to make sure that you never miss an episode of the Skip and Josh podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Google Play Music, any podcast app of your choice pretty much. If you do listen via Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave us a review. Send us an email, skipandjoshshow@gmail.com, Twitter @skipandjosh, or by liking and following our Facebook page. And as always, skipandjosh.com has all the links on how you can subscribe. That's it.
Okay, great.
All right. Great talking to you. Enjoy. Let's keep cheering for those Vegas Golden Knights.
Yes, we will. We should go to a game.
Oh my God. The tickets must be crazy. No, the prices?
I don't
They're
know. But
going
by the way,
wild.
did you notice? I didn't mention this. If you look at the final 4 teams,
Yeah.
Vegas, Winnipeg, Washington, and Tampa,
Yeah.
alphabetically, those are 4 of the bottom 6 teams, alphabetically.
Okay. Only you could come up with that. Like, who would notice that? Honestly.
Well,
I would never even
there's
think
a
about
V, a 2 W's, and a T.
Yeah.
Those are
And that's
all
it.
late in the alphabet.
Definitely they are. There's no doubt about it. So you think there's a conspiracy or a trend, or somehow they're alphabetically advantageous? They're alphabetically receiving an advantage?
Well, if Winnipeg ended up playing Washington in the final, I would have
Oh.
thought there was a conspiracy because those would be the bottom 2 alphabetically.
It's so true. That's awesome. All right. As we'll leave the listeners with that fabulous tidbit.
Have a good night.
The Skip and Josh podcast is over now. Don't worry, there'll be another episode soon.